As the final seconds of 2019 ticked away, jubilant revelers in Times Square were eager to embrace a new year, blissfully unaware what the next 12 months would bring.
Let's bring everyone to speed now on that story breaking in China, where they've closed off a major city at the center of that mysterious and growing viral outbreak.
It started in January with news of a mysterious virus overseas, first ravaging China, then stretching across the globe.
At the start of the day today, the coronavirus had been found in roughly 36 countries around the world.
Before long, COVID-19 had penetrated America's borders, first a little, then a lot.
Now more than 500 cases of coronavirus here in the United States.
The NCAA officially canceled the March Madness tournament, men and women. The latest in a string of major cancellations.
As the virus spread, our vernacular swelled.
Social distancing.
Social distancing.
Social distancing.
Even the word Zoom took on new meaning.
Mine's a quarantine because it's water.
We were told to stay home, work from home, learn from home.
I'm working from home. Craig and Al are working from home.
A shift that forced news anchors and hosts to transform their personal dwellings into TV studios.
Can I do that again?
Yep, you can. Hold on, let me tell the joke first.
We longed for our friends and scoured for everyday staples like toilet paper and Clorox wipes. But more than that, we mourned for those we lost, as cases in New York skyrocketed so rapidly, freezer trucks served as mobile morgues. In a city stifled by the constant screams of sirens, at 7 p.m. each night, the soundtrack shifted in tribute to healthcare heroes on the front lines. Comforting sounds also filled the air when coronavirus survivors were finally released from hospitals. In the spring, a new normal started to take shape.
The first greeting is a sign at the front door saying everyone who enters is required to wear face coverings.
But for some, patience wore thin. Protesters, some of them armed, called for an end to COVID restriction. Well, that thing on our face was on everyone's mind.
Excuse me. This nation is built on a constitution that protects the people from the government instead of the government from the people.
But the virus could not stop the one thing we were expecting in 2020, an election. For Democrats, after a messy caucus in Iowa,
we know by the time it's all said and done, Iowa, you have shocked the nation.
In a smoother primary in New Hampshire,
thank you, New Hampshire.
Senator Bernie Sanders and former Mayor Pete Buttigieg emerged as frontrunners, while former Vice President Joe Biden languished. In South Carolina, his fortunes changed.
We just won, and we've won big because of you.
Propelling the 77-year-old comeback kid to stunning wins on Super Tuesday.
Alabama and the Deep South went to Joe Biden tonight.
And eventually to the nomination. For his general election opponent, 2020 started with an impeachment trial.
Raise your right hand.
Though President Trump was acquitted, one Republican senator did vote to convict him of abuse of power.
The president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust.
One day earlier in the neighboring House chamber, the president delivered what would be his final State of the Union address.
The state of our union is stronger than ever before.
The tensions in the room punctuated by what Speaker Pelosi did with that speech.
Wow.
As the country struggled to contain a new pandemic, it was confronted by an all-too-familiar epidemic.
I can breathe.
The death of George Floyd, pinned beneath the knee of a Minneapolis police officer, ignited a nationwide movement against racial injustice. The protests followed.
This is the police precinct where the 4 officers had worked.
Not just the death of Floyd, but of Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, and so many more. The marches were largely peaceful, but tarnished by looting and violent conflicts in the street, forcing some businesses already battered by the pandemic to board up and shut down. In Washington, protesters near the White House were bombarded by tear gas, clearing the way so President Trump could cross the street for a now infamous photo op.
I want to stop right there for 1 second to say something. I don't know why MSNBC didn't show this, because they're reviewing everything that's happened this year. And they went back into China pertaining to the coronavirus whenever it first broke out. But for some reason, they didn't document that in which what was going on that I declared as being a major distraction in regards towards the impeachment hearings that preoccupied the American people's minds on something that was just about as bogus could be, because whenever it was all said and done with, Marvin Alexander himself, from, I believe, the Democrat Party here in the state of Tennessee, acknowledged that, yes, Donald Trump done something wrong pertaining to the Ukrainians and holding back aid, but it wasn't substantial enough to impeach him. So we went from a president on one end that was impeached to another end of him saying that he was acquitted, in which he never was fully acquitted. And the reason why that he never was fully acquitted is because there never was an actual trial. There was a hearing, but it never was a trial. There was an inquiry, but there never was a trial. And they knowed that what they was doing up there was incorrect pertaining to the facts that had already been brought out to the American people. So I don't know why NBC didn't go ahead and film that in regards towards the beginning developments of what went on in January leading into February. These other events are in fact events to the point that I knew that it was going to be so substantial of the George Floyd murder, open lynching basically, on TV, where a cop stood on his neck for, 7.5 minutes or something like that, that basically shut down his blood system going to the brain, that it was going to be so substantial that I went out and had a monument built in honor of George Floyd and in honor of our military servicemen and women, and went ahead and put on the same memorial, a worn-torn memorial of all of those who had went through massive, or most all of those, maybe not completely all of those, who had went through mass murders just within the past 25 or 30 years. And I know I missed some, because they consider a mass murder of 3 or more individuals. If 3 or more people get killed, it's considered a mass murder. As long as it's below 3, it's not considered a mass murder. In other words, you can kill one person and then move over and kill another person, and it's not considered a mass murder. But if you kill 3 people in the same setting, that's considered a mass murder. They just had a mass murder up the road here in Mayfield, Kentucky, where somebody went in and killed the father, the mother, and 2 or 3 kids. Killed the whole family. They still, I don't think, have gotten to the bottom of all of that yet. But we have went through trial and error in America this year at my age at 59. Like I would not have never, ever sat down on a pencil and paper and designed it out and said, this is what's going to occur pertaining to all the fires, pertaining to all the floods, pertaining to all the hurricanes. We have beat the hurricane season this year. Of all-time records, of keeping records pertaining to hurricanes that has struck in the United States. I don't know what the final tally of it's going to be pertaining to all the natural catastrophes of the floods that happened and the big windstorm that knocked over a lot of agriculture, as well as the fires and then the droughting situations. But the weather has been lashing out at society because of Mother Earth suffering in such of a way. I have never seen the world turned upside down like it is right now. And it's not just here in America. It's all over the planet. Australia went through one of their worst drought seasons of fires breaking out that they had ever seen. You can go to other places like India and places like that basically had mass casualties as far as earthquakes and flooding and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all over the planet. The planet this year has literally been crying out. And now we're faced upon what we're faced upon here, fixing to walk into the year 2021. Let's watch the rest of this. It's crucial that we document and keep up with the past. And it's not that we're trying to live in the past, but we're supposed to learn from the past. That way we don't continue to make the same mistakes again and again and again. You know, your professional people, your experts will tell you that that's one of the first signs of insanity, is whenever you continue to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, but at the same time expecting different results. Why should you think that you're going to have different results if you continue to do the same thing and the thing before you done the same thing was a complete total disaster? Just as I read a report that once you do something twice, it's no longer considered a mistake, but now it's considered a choice. And those are factors that I'm having to put into my life in regards to me overindulging in, let's say, eating, or overindulging in this or overindulging in that. I'm trying to steadily tweak, modify my life to be more satisfying in the eyes of my Heavenly Father. Because it says very, very distinctively there in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, for I, this is God speaking, for I have not found thy works perfect yet. To go back, and to do thy first works over again. Every day whenever I wake up is a new challenge for me. Every day whenever I wake up, I pray to God, God, please give me the strength. Give me the ability to fight off that in which what may come my way. Forgive me, O Lord, of my sins that I may have committed last night or yesterday, even while I was sleeping and wasn't even aware of it. Please forgive me of my sins and give me the strength to carry on the mission that you have given for me to carry on. And it speaks about that in the first 4 chapters of Revelations. For he who shall overcometh what, you may be asking? Overcometh sin? Yes, that's part of it. Overcometh the fear of death? Yes, that's part of it too. Overcoming the challenges of the human body pertaining to the wretchedness of mankind. That's the part that we're having to overcome, regardless whether you're Methodist, Presbyterian, Church of Christ, Jehovah's Witness, Lutheran, regardless whether you're Pentecostal or Baptist or whatever. You have to understand that these signs that we're in right now, we are in last day biblical Bible prophecy. We are at the day of judgment that has to be fallen upon to us. I don't know why MSNBC didn't give out that in which what Donald Trump was involved in pertaining to the impeachment dialogue that basically went through here in America that turned out to be nothing more than a sham. But they didn't. So that's the reason why that I thought that I would break in on what they're talking about here. Let's go back to the program here.
Infamous photo op. Days later, a 2-block stretch in front of the White House was emblazoned with 3 bold words and officially renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza. Civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis visited the plaza the month before he died. His extraordinary life honored in July at moving ceremonies in Selma, Alabama, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta.
There's only been 3 politicians in my life that I've actually shed tears for, and one of them was Ronald Reagan. The other one was McCain, John McCain. And this was a politician right here that I shed tears for, because I knowed his struggles and I knowed the things that he had overcome throughout his life in the civil rights movement era, and it profoundly touched me this year whenever he passed.
Amid this year's racial reckoning, Joe Biden made history picking a woman of color, Senator Kamala Harris, as his running mate.
I am incredibly honored by this responsibility, and I'm ready to get to work.
The campaign carried on with unconventional conventions.
Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is.
Democrats opted for a largely virtual affair that concluded with a firework finale.
The best is yet to come!
While Republicans sparked controversy, using the White House as a political backdrop. Then, on a Friday night in September, 2020 delivered another unexpected blow.
Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died.
The death of a trailblazing Supreme Court justice.
She was a role model. She was a friend.
With the election just 6.5 weeks away, Republicans pushed ahead with plans to replace the liberal icon with a conservative justice, Amy Coney Barrett.
Today it is my honor to nominate one of our nation's most brilliant and gifted legal minds.
She was introduced at a White House ceremony that would soon become known as a COVID super spreader event. And on October 2nd, the virus reached the highest office in the land.
Standing here on the North Lawn and looking up and watching the helicopter take the President of the United States to the hospital where he is sick with the coronavirus, it is sobering.
He would return to the White House 3 days later, removing his mask on the balcony and delivering this message to Americans.
I learned so much about coronavirus, and one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you.
It was a stunningly short blip in the campaign, bookended by 2 debates.
Did you use the word smart? Don't ever use the word smart with me.
The first one,
Cowboys, stand back and stand by.
A raucous event.
Why would you answer that question?
The question is,
radical left. Will you shut up, man?
Final one, much calmer.
Nobody has done more for the black community than Donald Trump.
Between those debates, a vice presidential face-off.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Remembered for the surprising guest that generated a lot of buzz. Most voters made up their minds early, casting their ballots days, even weeks before Election Day. Their prompt actions would not be rewarded with a quick decision.
In Wisconsin, in Georgia, in North Carolina, we have one close race after another.
For days, captivated voters monitored every minor update in swing state totals.
2 days out from Election Day and still no clear winner.
Until the Saturday after the election finally delivered a decision.
Okay, we have an announcement to make. Joe Biden is president-elect.
That night, the president-elect and his history-making VP-elect addressed a divided nation.
I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify.
Still, President Trump refused to concede.
It was a rigged election.
Despite no evidence of widespread fraud. All the while, the coronavirus surged across America, overrunning hospitals from coast to coast.
We as a country are in a very, very difficult, if not crisis, situation.
No doubt 2020 will be remembered as the year that showed little mercy. The year that started with a helicopter crash that killed basketball great Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 others. The year that robbed us of Jeopardy host Alex Trebek, Black Panther star Chadwick Boseman, musician Eddie Van Halen, actress Naya Rivera, and so many more. through it all, 2020 has also given us reasons to celebrate. Like when a South Korean film won Best Picture at the Oscars, or when a tiny, adorable owl was discovered inside the Rockefeller Center tree, nursed back to health, and released back into nature. We, too, hope 2021 brings a return to familiar territory, propelled by a massive vaccination effort that's just getting started. 2020's vision is for a better year to come.
And it will be a better year to come. A big thanks to NBC's Joe Fryer for that look back. Millions of Americans struggling to put food on the table. We're live at a food bank that's just blocks from some of the most profitable companies in the world.
My new normal, fewer asthma attacks.
Less oral steroids.
Taking my treatment at home.
Nucala is a once-monthly add-on injection for severe eosinophilic asthma, not for sudden breathing problems. Allergic reactions can occur. Get
in the year, I hope I get my years right. In the year 2008, whenever the bubble burst occurred, and as young Bush was leaving office, he had to borrow $775 billion to bail out General Motors and Ford and Chrysler, to help the airplane industry, and to help out with the financial bubble burst that happened in the real estate market. At that time, I was doing a lot of traveling around in the United States, and of course fuel, gasoline, was being driven up by I don't know what, but at that time I was paying as much as $4.50, $5 a gallon for gasoline. That added insult to injury pertaining to what the Americans was going through, and I guess the rest of the world too as well. That helped to put a whole lot of people in the poorhouse. A whole lot of people. A matter of fact, whenever I was down in the Atlanta region in the fall of 2009, they was still suffering through the ramifications of all of that, to the degree that seeing the food shelters was a common thing out there, where they was feeding as much as 2,000 or 3,000 people in each shelter. Now, I had become familiarized with doing that type of work whenever the ice storm hit up in the north, up in Kentucky, north of Tennessee, in January of 2009, whenever a crisis center come out of Atlanta with two 18-wheelers that basically opened up, and we was feeding as much as 5,000 people a day out of a church there in Mayfield, Kentucky, during the major ice storm. I had seen some things that I thought that I would never have to experience or see again, pertaining to people being in a hard way to go, in a hardship. Now, you keep in mind, I was raised up with a World War II drill sergeant that went through, I guess, one of the barrenest times that America had to go through whenever he was just a teenager, pertaining to the 1929 depression that began, of people basically being on food lines and them having to limit how much gas that you could buy. They had to limit how many tires that you could buy, and they had to limit towards all kinds of stuff. And I was told about these soup lines growing up as a young child. But you never really, you hear it, but it really doesn't register to you until you actually see it. And whenever I started going from state to state, from place to place, and I started seeing the devastation pertaining to the fuel prices going up and what went on with the real estate burst, I thought to myself, yeah, this is exactly what Daddy was telling me about, of what that he had experienced whenever he was just a young teenager growing up, I guess up in Chicago at the time, because his parents had to go to Chicago just to be able to feed the family because things had gotten so bad in the urban rural areas, in your country settings, to the point that if you had children, you liable to wind up starving them to death. Times was hard back then. Well, I seen that firsthand, of people that was suffering, people that was doing without. This year has exceeded what I seen in 2008 leading into 2009, probably 1,000-fold in comparison to how bad it was then in 2008 leading into 2009 compared to how bad it is now in the year 2020. When you have people that is suffering so much that they put aside their pride and they put aside their egos and they go ahead and go to a food market, a place, not a food market, excuse me, but a food pantry place where they're giving out food for the first time, you know that people are in dire need of what's going on. And I've said before, and I'll say again, if it wasn't for the volunteers that helped during the Katrina damage, that went down there and volunteered during that scenario, God only knows how bad the suffering would have actually been in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, the lower part of Louisiana, down towards New Orleans. People's resources can only go so far pertaining to what that they can give. What extra that they have to be able to give with. And whenever you see a scenario that is unfolding the way that it is unfolding in the year 2020, you start to scratch your head towards wondering, my God, where is this going to go? How far is the suffering actually going to merge into? And of course, none of us know the answer. But I truly believe this, that we're going to be looking at possibly one of the most darkest moments in history since the 1929 Depression, right here in the USA, in this winter, in the year 2020 leading into 2021. In other words, this isn't going to mysteriously, miraculously just up and go away. The cart, the apple cart, has been turned over. The carnal damage from all of this is now merging in areas that you never would have thought would have merged in. And I'm just not talking about people getting sick and becoming ill. I'm talking about people literally not having enough to feed their families on. So whenever you watch a program like this, keep in mind of being grateful and thankful for the things that you do have, because it could actually be 100 times worse here in America, like it is in Honduras, or like it is in El Salvador, or like it is in Africa, or like it is in other stricken places in the world that has just been devastated, including our neighbors down to the south pertaining to Mexico and our neighbors to the north pertaining to Canada. These are all grieving, stricken moments that the Bible talks about pertaining to the suffering of the sin of humanity. It says in the Bible that these will be the sorrows that will fall upon to society in the last days. The great sorrows is now upon us. For the first woe we are in. And the second woe cometh quickly, pertaining to the opening of the second, third, and the fourth seal. We have not yet fulfilled the fulfillment of the first seal. And until we see a revival that will elevate into a revolution to the point that we actually see a utopia, even though it will only be a temporary utopia, we still have not seen the full fulfillment of the opening of that first seal. That's the part that I keep preaching to people about. You know, I have some people say, oh, we're in the third seal. Oh, we're in the fourth seal. Oh, Donald Trump, he's the Antichrist. He's this, he's that. Donald Trump is not the Antichrist. Donald Trump has made some mistakes, just like anybody else has made mistakes. But he is not the actual Antichrist. I do believe that the actual Antichrist is alive. I believe that we're in that time period to where the actual Antichrist is alive. Now, the individual that I bumped into is only a follower of the Antichrist. He is Satan in the flesh, pertaining to the Arabic community. The ones that's going to set up over there in the Middle East, pertaining to the doomsday devil's dole. You have to be biblically inclined, spiritually motivated in understanding where we are, where we've been, and where we're supposed to go. And it all lines up with biblical Bible prophecy, things that was prophesied, covenants that was made hundreds, thousands of years ago that we're just now starting to see the full fulfillment of. You have to recognize this is where we are as a society, regardless whether you be a Christian society or a non-Christian society. You have to recognize this, and if not, you're blinder than a bat. In other words, you're blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, as the blind man used to say. So let's watch the rest of this. I don't know what else they're going to feature here on this program. Let's watch the rest of this real quick and see how far this takes us in merging into the year 2021. And I'm sure that I'll probably document some more programs that's similar to this one, of those that are touching off on various things that has occurred in the year 2020. But it's been one of the most enduring, daring moments of my entire life. Not just with me having to struggle with my personal failing health pertaining to my diabetes too, but it has been one of the most psychological challenges in waking up every day seeing doom and gloom and despair, doom and gloom and despair, doom and gloom and despair. It has been one of the most challenging moments of my life to be able to maintain a smile, maintain happiness, maintain a fortitude of keeping a high morale. It has been challenging, to say the least, in enduring what I personally have had to endure this year, that almost has exceeded that in which what I had to endure in the year 20 and 17, whenever my brother died, and the year 20 and 18, leading into all the aggravation and being targeted, hunted, and stalked right here at my own home place at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. And I feel like that if I could have went through that towards what went on in 18, 19, and now the year 20, if I can go through that and still halfway keep a smile on my face and have a good sense of humor about all this, and keep motivated towards having somewhat of a high morale, I feel like that God will continue to bless me, encourage me, and give me the strength that I need to overcome these demons and these challenges that has befallen not just my personal life, but all of our lives. Now, whenever I make reference towards what I think or what my opinion is about the chief and commander of the United States of America, that is truly my opinion, and I have a right to my opinion. I have a right to my opinion about how I feel about somebody that has brought more agony and displacency into our lives. And just a while ago, I left a message with an individual out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that is now retired, that used to work for the U.S. Marshals. Basically worked with the Oklahoma authorities after the Oklahoma bombing. They keep talking about all these irregularities pertaining to the voting issues that Donald Trump obviously can't get over. There has been irregularities throughout almost every election, probably since the beginning of elections. Now, whether or not those irregularities happen intentionally or not intentionally, I don't know. Because some things just get overlooked. You know, you would like to believe that we have a perfect system, but believe it or not, it's not perfect. Mistakes do happen. People do cheat. Okay? The thing about it is, what Donald Trump don't understand, there's not enough irregularities to throw this election that he keeps wanting to overthrow. And I don't think he's doing it out of will. I don't think he's doing it because he truly believes that he's won the election. I think he's doing it now out of chaos, out of just being stubborn, hard-headed, not wanting to give in. And what he don't realize, that in the middle of all this pandemic and all these people getting sick and getting hungry and people suffering, all he's doing is adding insult to injury pertaining to him being the leader of the free world. I have never seen anything like it. It's like you got one problem, then you got another obstacle, then you got another obstacle, then you got another thing to have to, a hurdle to have to go around or go over, then you got another hurdle. It's like, when is it going to stop? How come this guy, somebody cannot sit down and explain to him that what he's doing is ripping and tearing the country apart even further than what has been torn apart? How come he cannot see this? I think he does see it. And I think he continues on his journey towards wanting to bring more selfish destruction to his own people.
Americans filed unemployment claims last week, the second week of declines. In all, close to 20 million Americans are on some form of unemployment right now, and it is important to note that figure does not include gig workers. It does not include those who have been underemployed as well. Jake Ward is outside a San Francisco food pantry this morning, and Jake, set the scene for us there where you are in San Francisco.
They was talking on the news a while ago that this is San Francisco. If you ain't familiar geographically with California, San Francisco is north of California. That's out there where my niece lives, out in Lodi in Stockton, California. San Francisco's got the Golden Gate Bridge. San Francisco was whenever I was out there in the fall of 2012, in the month of October, that I wound up losing my job and losing my apartment all the same day, simply because somebody decided to do a background check on me and figuring out that I was involved in something major out in the city and the state of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. San Francisco is where I first got adapted to the 99%ers that was protesting against the 1%ers in protesting against how that the powerful and the rich was taking advantage of the working class and the poor class. San Francisco is where they have the little trolley cars that goes up and down the little mountains and stuff. You got Oakland and all those other places out there that all merge into a metro area. And I forgot how many people is in that area. Probably at least 5 million, maybe 7 million, something like that. LA, Orange County, just got through hearing a while ago that they are having right now one individual dying every 10 minutes just in one county alone. Every 10 minutes or somebody dying. Every 10 minutes. And the hospitals are so full that some of the ambulances have to drive around for as much as 7 or 8 hours before they can finally figure out what they're going to do with the patients. They have patients right now out in hallways and out in parking lots that's literally dying before they can ever get them in to the emergency room and tend to their needs. I just thought in 2008 and 2009 over in Cobb County and places over in downtown Atlanta, whenever I was working there in Kennesaw, Georgia for a body shop called Gerber Collision and Glass. I just thought that I had seen devastation pertaining to what had occurred in 2008, leading into 2009, pertaining to the bubble burst. This, what we're seeing and what we're experiencing, will beat that hands down, probably 1,000 times that severe. The only difference is the fuel prices now are still maintaining down in the average range of $2 a gallon or somewhere around $2 a gallon. I guess diesel fuel is probably up around $3 a gallon, depending upon where you're at. And we're having a different set of circumstances, but the circumstances today are more devastating than whatever would have ever even thought about occurring in 2008 or 2009. So please listen to the rest of this as they're touching off on these food pantries that have now been spread abroad all over the countryside, that without them, people would literally starve to death. And to think that we have a government that can't see this pertaining to the stimulus checks that needs to be increased from $600 to $2,000, to think that we have certain people up there in the White House right now that can't identify with this type of suffering and this type of pain, tells me that we have people in the White House that don't need to be in the White House. And how come people continue to keep voting these people back in place pertaining to various people that's making life harder on people is just bewildering to me. I mean, you talk about Kentucky. No, Kentucky ain't the poorest state in comparison to the state of Mississippi. But Kentucky is not a rich state. There is hurt in Kentucky probably worse than the state of Tennessee on an economical level, and especially over in eastern Kentucky, where they've shut down all the coal mines. This McConnell guy, for him to do what he's doing, as far as I'm concerned, he must be working for the Antichrist. Because anybody that's willing to do that to their own people in their own state needs to be tarred and feathered and run completely out of town. That will oppose helping their own people. I'm bewildered by all this. I've never seen nothing like this. I mean, I was too young, obviously, to embrace the Vietnam War in the same sense of some of my people that's older than me. I'm 59, soon to be 60. I did not get the full effects of the Vietnam War. Even though I watched it on TV just like everybody else, I was too young to take it all in. And whenever we moved from Chicago down to Tennessee in 1967, during all the civil rights movement, whenever we first moved down to Tennessee, we didn't have no TV to amount to anything for probably the next 3 to 5 years. And I don't know if Daddy intended for it to be that way, but we were so poor that what little bit of channels that we could get was just local channels, and TV exposure pertaining to the media wasn't near as good as what it is today pertaining to everything that was going on. I mean, we heard tales of things that was going on, but as long as it was out of sight, out of mind, you really didn't get the full effect of everything that was happening, regardless whether it was happening in Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi, pertaining to the civil rights movements. But this that's happening right now, it's not just happening in 2 or 3 states. It's not just happening in 2 or 3 countries. This is happening all over the world. This is something unlike anything that not only the Americans have ever experienced, but anything that our people today has experienced. Now, I seen them the other day. They had somebody on TV that lived to be 106 or 109 years old. And they actually could remember what went on during the 1918 pandemic, as well as what went on in 1929 of the stock market crashing and people just being poorer than dirt. It was a female. I don't know if her mind was as sharp as what it should have been, but she claimed that she could remember a lot of details towards what went on in the suffering during the time that it went on whenever she was just a little girl. But this, what we're seeing today, is unlike any other sorrow that I can remotely read about or understand about, including the 1918 pandemic. Back in 1918, people didn't live like they do today towards trying to keep up with the Joneses. People didn't live on a credit card or a plastic card. You was who you was, regardless whether you was educated or non-educated, regardless whether you lived in the country life or the city life. You was what you was during that era that you was in that era. People didn't try to be phony. People didn't try to be fake. By and large, people was real. Nothing in comparison to how the people today live, pretending to the makeup and doing their nails and living off a credit card and sponging from one week to another, and all the drugs and all the guns and all the mixed up emotions. I ain't going to lie to you. This really sinks home to me, and it gives me a gut-wrenching, sickening feeling to see such devastation that has befallen upon to the world like this. Because, like I said, I don't remember ever reading about anything ever being this bad, maybe in comparison to the Civil War that happened here in America for 5 or 6 years. That had to have been the top of all top pertaining to the suffering and the despair of humanity that was living over here in America during the time that we was living here, or during the time that they was living here, the Civil War. I'm just afraid that if they don't get a handle on this stuff pertaining to this sickness that is now aggressing, because they have figured out that this disease has mutated, and now it's become 7 times more likely, becoming lethal in the degree that you can catch it 7 times more likely than you could 6 months ago, because it has mutated. It has progressed. And whenever you hear things and see things like we're seeing right now on TV in regards to these food pantries that are popping up to be able to help people, you have to start scratching your head to wonder, where is the bottom to all this? Because it reminds me of using the scenario of a mountain climber that's going up a big steep mountain, and every time he or she grabs a hold of a root or a cliff or a rock, and they think that they got a good footing, and instead of going up the mountain, they slide down 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 feet. Instead of going up, they're going down. And every time they try to take another footing, get another grab on something, it breaks loose and they fall down even more. You cannot continue to do this as a mountain climber and think that you're ever going to meet the top or reach the top. You have to start accepting reality that, you know what, instead of me going up the mountain, it looks like apparently that I'm going to go down the mountain. Now the question is this: once you get down to the bottom of the mountain, what's the bottom of the mountain going to be like? That's what I'm asking. Once we get down to the bottom of all this, in which scientists and doctors and your experts will tell you, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel because of this antidote that they've come out with. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and in 2 or 3 months from now, we'll be getting over all this. Will we? Really? Because if you're not affected by it one way, you're going to be affected by it in another. This is obvious that things is not getting better, things is getting worse. And I don't mean to be a pessimist. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I do want to be a realitist. I want to be in the form of reality in knowing what I'm hearing and seeing and have experienced personally towards things escalating and getting worse. But it's like, where is the bottom going to be? When are we going to take a turn towards seeing this go in the opposite direction? Because right now, you know, we got these emergency care centers around here, and every time I drive by one of them, I'll look, and the parking lots are full. I'm hearing stories out in Oklahoma and other parts of the country to where people are getting sicker and sicker by the hour, by the day. So you have to ask yourself the question, just like the mountain climber that's trying to go to the top of the mountain, realizing that he ain't going to go to the top, he's going to go down to the bottom. You have to ask the $64,000 question. Okay, we're on our way down. It's obvious that the boat has been swamped. We're sinking. Now, what's it going to be like once we get down to the bottom? Is there going to be any shelter? Is there going to be a turnaround? I truly believe that there will be, but it's only going to be by the will of God. And it's only going to be through God that allows for us to get through this. Like I said, I'm not trying to blow smoke or play Whistling Dixie to nobody right here on the last day of the year of the Jubilee 2020. I'm not trying to blow no smoke, but I'm trying to be realistical in reality form towards looking and saying, okay, we went through what we went through, not only in 2008, but we went through what we went through during 9/11. We went through other events that has caused other problems. Where is all this leading? Where are we heading to? What is the bottom going to be like once we actually get down to the bottom? Once we get to the bottom. Because right now we're not going up the mountain, we're going down the mountain. Now there'll be certain people, scientists and media commentators and stuff like that that tell you, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Really? As far as I'm concerned, this man right here, I don't think he's purposely lied, okay? But because of us going through what we're going through that is brand new off the city block, per se, as somebody used to say, I think it's just a guessing game between him and the rest of them right now that's making these broadcasts or these predictions or these long-term analogies. I think if anybody's whistling Dixie and blowing smoke, which I'm not saying that ain't a good doctor, and I'm not saying that the doctors and the nurses and the scientists that's working right now below him aren't good people. But what I am trying to say is this: because we're in an exploratory situation, none of us, including people like him, really don't know where the bottom of all this is going to be. Now, they can try to give you hope. They can whistle Dixie to you and blow smoke. But every time I turn the news on, the news is being inundated by stuff that you're fixing to see right here that's going on in San Francisco. So let's watch this. On the last day of 2020, in all these eruptions, in all these discursions, in all these problems that we've had to wrap our minds and our hearts around just within the past 350, I think it was leap year this year, 358 days, 357 days, however many days it is in a year. But we've all had to wrap our hearts and our minds and our lives around this. This has affected our lives. And because of it, we need to pay very, very close attention to not only what we've been through, but what we're going through and what we may end up having to go through. Because whenever my daddy told me about what that he was going through as a young child after the 1929 Depression, whenever the stock market crashed, I couldn't relate to that. Soup lines. I couldn't relate to that. I couldn't relate to limiting gasoline and tires and food because of the war. As far as rationing, you only had, I think it was like S&H green stamps that they gave you. And once you used a certain amount of those stamps on your fuel, you couldn't get no more fuel. Once you got a certain set of tires, you couldn't get another set of tires. I couldn't relate my mind around that as he was telling me that because I didn't go through that. But now, in the year 2020, and the other stuff that I've seen and experienced, I can start to relate a little bit towards what my dad was going through as a teenager up in Chicago, toughing it out during that era.
So, Craig, good morning. First of all, this is a pretty desperate but also inspiring scene. This morning, the food pantry is going to open here in about 15 minutes. And as it prepares to do so, volunteers are going along and essentially shopping for each family. They're going along the line here and putting a handful of onions, a handful of carrots, a handful of broccoli into each of these bags. And then they'll be distributing it out to a line that has already begun to form around the corner here. The people that run this, we were speaking to the executive director a moment ago, and he basically said that prior to coronavirus, the San Francisco Marin Food Bank gave out about 30,000 families worth of food every week. Now, the number has doubled, including many people that have never been food insecure before, had no idea how to even apply for this kind of help, and in many cases have been too embarrassed to even ask for it until now. But to be here in this, extraordinarily wealthy and extraordinarily expensive city, and to see so many desperate people needing help on the final day of the year is hard to see, Craig.
Here's the thing, Jake. I mean, where you are in terms of geography, as I understand it, you're just blocks away from the headquarters of some of the largest tech companies on the globe. This juxtaposition, it's jarring. And I think a lot of folks watching and listening have to think, how can this be?
Well, I think that's right, Craig. I mean, one of the numbers to think about when you look at this new set of jobless figures is the number of people applying for help as gig workers. You mentioned them earlier, right? I mean, we're here in this extremely successful, incredibly prosperous city, and yet you have across America more than 9 million people who were working some form of gig work, who now have to apply for assistance that didn't even exist a year ago. I mean, you think about the structural change in this nation. It's really like we're in an entirely new country versus the America of 2019.
Jacob Ward for us there at the scene of something that's become all too familiar in this country over the past 9 or 10 months. A lot of folks waiting in line for food in the United States of America. Jacob, thank you. Happy New Year to you as well, sir. After a racial reckoning across our country, there's been a renewed focus this year on policing. In Los Angeles, a community policing program is working to become a model for the entire LAPD. Steve Patterson explains.
As police killings ignited nationwide protests. Who do you serve? Who do you protect? Promises by law enforcement to reform from coast to coast. In Los Angeles, the LAPD vowed to shift away from crime fighting to focus on being members of the communities they're sworn to serve and protect. In some of LA's toughest public housing projects.
It started in Nickerson Gardens, Jordan Downs.
Amada Tingarides also grew up in South LA. The Watts native recently became the first black woman deputy police chief in the department's history.
You have to allow yourself to be open, to be communicative, to be approachable.
An early advocate of community-based policing, Chief T, as she's known by her officers, heads the LAPD's Community Safety Partnership Bureau in South LA.
The purpose of the CSP program is for officers to understand the history and the culture of the communities that they're working in.
The 100-strong CSP officers get specialized training and commit to serving in the same community for at least 5 years. They build relationships with community members, even coach youth sports, and mentor neighborhood children.
It took a while for the community to trust us because, again, we were brand new faces to them. And unfortunately for some, they've had interaction with the police, which has been negative interactions.
At Avalon Gardens Housing Project in South LA, residents are cautiously optimistic.
Has it made things better?
You got your good officers, you got your bad officers. Got your ones who come in here, who go beyond their badge and want to kick your doors in and bust your windows. But never not once a CSP officer did that.
And at one of LA's oldest and largest projects, Pueblo del Rio.
When you turn on the TV to see people wanting to defund the police.
I think that we need a backup of police officers that are here to protect us.
Do you remember a time before they were here?
Yeah.
What was it like?
It was not that great. There was a lot of crime. Yeah. A lot of robberies, a lot of shootings.
After protests to defund the police, $150 million was slashed from the LAPD, reducing the force to less than 9,000 in a city of over 4 million. Violent crime spiked almost everywhere in LA, with a notable exception.
We haven't seen an increase in our CSP neighborhood engagement areas, which goes to show that something's working.
Building on this success, the LAPD wants CSP as the model for the entire force, with police departments across the country considering Chief T's methods.
And I think that if law enforcement agencies across this country can buy into the understanding that building trust and humanizing one another has an impact on decreasing crime, then I think it'd be a no-brainer for everybody to practice that concept.
The reimagining of policing in America, starting with a handshake, one community, at a time.
Steve Patterson for us there. Steve, thank you. That is going to do it for me this hour. Have a happy...
I want to weigh in on the last part here, what we're looking at, pertaining to the homelessness situation. After I went through what I went through pertaining to corrupt individuals working for Land Between the Lakes up in Kentucky that called me out over making 2 telephone calls that was non-threatening, and I was not in any type of violation towards violating any type of court order. The 2 telephone calls was in the span of about a 90-day arrangement. 1 telephone call was made directly to the law enforcement precinct there, actually in Land Between the Lakes, right outside of Golden Pond. And the other telephone call was given to a Mr. Gary Hawkins. Gary Hawkins, that used to work for Land Between the Lakes of the Forestry Division. Whenever they decided to do what they was going to do towards going all the way out to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, gather me up and drag me back to Kentucky and punish me like I had committed some sort of a wild-ass violent crime towards incarcerating me 9.5 months in Trigg County. Actually, it was in Christian County, because Trigg County don't have a jail system, but it was based around the charges that had been formatted from Trigg County off of Judge Woodall. Me having to spend 9.5 months being psychoanalyzed by their state doctors up in LaGrange, Kentucky. After I got out, the people in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, even though I had been nabbed up, thought enough of me to say, DJ, if you come out here, you got a job. You got a job. You're guaranteed a job, and we're now in the new facility that we was trying to build while you was helping us the first time. Now we're actually in the new facility. And sure enough, whenever I went back out there, my employer, Lee, I think his name is Lawrence, I may be wrong about his last name, and the supervisor, his name was Jeff, we all called him Jeffro, welcomed me with open arms. As I was working in that area, doing extensive body work, because they'd been ravaged by another storm. Keep in mind, this is Oklahoma. I also wanted to contribute to other factors going on in my life, in my private life. I had went to a church called People's Church, just outside of downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, over in, I think it was the Edmond area. Anyways, I had put my name down towards a volunteer because in late fall, whenever school's fixing to open, different churches open up programs to help girls who have gotten impregnated, that's got children, towards making sure that the children has sufficient clothes, sufficient haircuts. They even offered oil changes for the women, for the girls. They offered backpacks, free lunch pails, etc., etc. So I signed up on this particular program, not realizing that I was going to be called. Well, about 3 weeks later, I was called. Can you help us attend this event on this weekend? Absolutely, I said. No problem. Where do you want me to be? They wanted me to go down towards Lincoln Street, somewhere off the alleys of Oklahoma, basically down in the ghetto area, I guess. I go down there, and I'm already engaged in parking cars, setting up water coolers, doing stuff that needed to be done because this was a big event that they only do once a year for children. When all of a sudden I walk in to the facility to go to the bathroom and I'm basically chased or stalked by 3 police officers who had identified who I was, that cornered me in the bathroom after me coming out of the stall, wanting to know all the details about how that I had wound up there. And I explained to them that I had put my name down for a volunteer and that the People's Church that was conducting this particular operation today had contacted me and they wanted me to help. They said, well, they don't want you to help no more. A matter of fact, you're this close of going back to jail. I go, why? What have I done? I've been doing everything that they've told me to do. They go, don't look at us, Mr. Jackson, like we don't know who you are. We know exactly who you are. You're the one that made the announcement that there was more involved with the Oklahoma bombing other than Timothy McVeigh and Nichols. And because of it, we want you off of this property now. That got back to my boss, Lee Lawrence. And about a week later, he cornered me up, him and Jeff, and gave me an ultimatum. Similar towards the ultimatum that they gave me up here in Dresden, Tennessee, working for Mr. Jimmy Atkins. Auto builders, body shop in Dresden, Tennessee. Told me that if I didn't get off the radio waves, that I'd just as well seek employment elsewhere. Mr. Lee Lawrence, there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and Jeff told me that if I